According to your opinion, do you think that the European Union is still in the crisis, or many different crises, or perhaps the situation is, well, a bit brighter, as we could read out from Mr. Juncker?
The European Union was never in a crisis. As a European Union, there were serious problems in some countries, like those who have a credit boom and then collapsed, Spain, Greece for various reasons, Ireland, which have got out of the crisis. And second, there have been problems in countries which have not reformed enough, France and Italy. So the solution to the European Union problems are the solutions to those problems which are present in problem countries. And let us hope that President Macron would deliver on his reform promises, and also that Italy would succeed with reforms. We have some good examples. For example, Spain, after suffering a deep crisis, has reformed and is now recovering.
Well, this the scenario that in which the EU might be divided into different circles of integration. Perhaps it's not the most likely one, but still it is a probable scenario. And how such discussions or such scenario, if implemented, may affect such projects like Eastern Partnership?
Well, there are at least three questions. First, there have been different groups within the European Union. It's nothing new. Not everybody belongs to Schengen. That's one fact. Not everybody belongs to the Eurozone. So different speeds corresponds to reality. The basic question is that certain basic institutions and values have to be shared by everybody, including economic freedom. Single market has been an enormous achievement, not only economic, but also from the human's point of view, but it's not completed. For example, services has to be liberalized, and one should resist attempts to introduce internal protectionism in the single market, like the proposed directive referring to the posted workers or transportation workers. So this is, I think, the problem.
Do you think?
And Eastern Partnership, again, it's extremely important to pressure or to encourage reforms in countries which belong to this group. I've been dealing with Ukraine, and I think Ukraine has done enormous progress, especially in macroeconomic stabilization and in some reforms. But to ensure that you to grow faster and in a sustained way, certain reforms can be completed.
Some say that after the signing the association agreement between Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia with the EU, including the DCFTA, and after lifting visas, there is little incentive for those countries to interact and to reform according to the European standards. Would you agree with such a assessment?
First of all, one should focus on Ukraine, because Ukraine is by far the most important case, not only because it's the largest country, but it is one of the basic bastion or fundament or pillar of the better framework or system in Europe. And it resists this Russian or Putin's aggression, and Putin should not win. So for geopolitical reasons, Ukraine deserves more support. It has done a lot, as I said, on macroeconomic stabilization, some reforms in the gas sector. It has to go forward in some other fields. And the question of incentives always arises. Even the best rulers meet resistance. So they have to have some arguments to convince the population to increase support for reforms. And I think the idea put forward by Prime Minister Kubilius of Lithuania makes sense to present to the Ukrainian population that there are some more rewards depending on well-targeted reforms. So the question is to create enough financial incentives and to communicate this much better to the people in Ukraine.
Do you think that relying on the civil society in Ukraine, that is the good strategy, that could be the incentive for the Ukrainian government to speed up with the implementation of reforms?
Now, anti-reformers always appeal to some people and cheat them. This is populism. So reformers has to be able to mobilize their support for reforms better and stronger, and this should be and could be helped by presenting new initiatives, which I said have to be very well communicated, so that less people support anti-reformers who cheat, and more people support reformers who propose something which works if implemented.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about Ukraine, about your experience there? And some say that Ukraine has done a lot, but still the pace of reform is pretty much slow, and that the glass is rather half empty. Would you agree with that?
First of all, one should remember that in 2014 the economic situation in Ukraine was tragic. First, because of legacy of Yanukovych, and second, because of Russian aggression, not only military but also economic, blocking Ukrainian exports. And it was unavoidable for Ukraine to suffer a very deep recession of more than around 14%. Despite that, they radically reduced the budget deficit. Otherwise, there would be hyperinflation. And the budget deficit was reduced from above 10% to less than 3%. At the same time, they have massively increased military spending. So it's a tremendous achievement, unbelievable achievement. Inflation has declined or has been reduced from over 40% to around 12% in 2016-17. And banking system avoided a total collapse by a very thoughtful and well-structured activity of the Ukrainian Central Bank. And this should be emphasized much more. On structural reforms, some of them were very well advanced, especially in the gas sector, which is very, very important. There were encouraging beginnings with streamlining the court system, eradicating corruption, creating new institutions. On some other reforms, more progress is needed, especially on deregulation, demonopolization, and privatization of the economy. But in some, what the Ukrainians have done is a world record. It should be supported and should be praised, while focusing on what needs to be completed.
Why do you think the Ukrainian authorities, they managed to conduct all these reforms? What is the internal source of that reforms?
Well, sometimes it is so that situation is so dramatic that you have to act if you understand it. So the situational pressures and a very good team. On structural reforms, leadership is needed and the support for the people to overcome the resistance created by the populace in every country. You have different streams and you have different politicians and different proposals. So the reform side, which is crucial to Ukrainian success, should be strengthened.
Thank you very much.